Hello, everyone, and welcome to Learn English Faster, the podcast where we learn to speak English with confidence, without fear, and with pleasure. I'm Rita, your host for today, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here with you for our very first episode.
And I'm Diablo. Hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. We are very happy to be launching this podcast together.
Our goal is simple: to help you improve your English by listening to natural, enriching conversations adapted for all levels, from A1 to C2.
Exactly. And to do that, we've designed each episode as a true immersion in the English language. We're going to ask you questions, explore detailed answers, and above all, provide you with authentic conversation models.
Whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced learner, there will always be something to learn here. You can listen to us while you cook, walk, or even while you're on the train. The goal is to expose you to living, rich, and varied English.
Before we begin, a big thank you to you, dear listeners, for your support. We know that speaking a foreign language can be scary sometimes, but remember, every word, every sentence is a step toward fluency.
Very well said. So, without further ado, let's launch our first discussion. Diablo is going to ask me 3 important questions, and I will try to answer them as completely as possible. Get comfortable. Open your ears wide. Here we go.
Rita, many English learners tell us they are afraid to speak in public or even in private. In your opinion, why is this fear so common when learning a foreign language?
That's an excellent question, Diablo, and I'm sure many of our listeners will recognize themselves in what I'm about to say. The fear of speaking a foreign language, especially out loud, is a very widespread phenomenon. This fear, in my opinion, has several origins, and it is completely normal. First of all, there's the fear of making mistakes. When learning a new language, we are not sure of ourselves. We wonder if the grammar is correct, if the vocabulary is appropriate, if the accent is understandable. This uncertainty can be paralyzing.
We're afraid others will laugh, that they won't understand us, or worse, that they'll judge us.
Yet, we must remember that mistakes are part of the process. We learn to walk by falling, and we learn to speak fluently by speaking with mistakes. Then there is the issue of self-confidence. Many people associate their language skills with their intelligence or personal worth. They think, if I speak poorly, it means I am bad. This reasoning is false and dangerous. Learning a language is a skill, not proof of intelligence.
You can be brilliant in your field and still struggle to speak another language. That doesn't take away from your value.
There is also a cultural barrier. Sometimes we don't dare express ourselves because we're afraid of not being polite or not respecting the social codes of the language we're learning. In English, for example, we use a lot of polite phrases, and that can be intimidating. But we must tell ourselves that native speakers are often very tolerant and appreciative when a foreigner makes the effort to speak their language.
Finally, I think there's a form of perfectionism that holds learners back. They want to speak perfectly before even opening their mouths. However, perfection doesn't exist, even among native speakers. It's better to speak imperfectly than not to speak at all. Silence doesn't make you progress. Speaking does.
Yes, to summarize, the fear comes from a mix of insecurity, perfectionism, social pressure, and lack of confidence. But it can be overcome. The first step is to accept imperfection. The second is to practice regularly. And the third is to remember that we learn a language to communicate, not to impress. If you manage to make yourself understood, even with mistakes, you have already won.
Rita, many learners tell us that they understand English well in writing, but they have a lot of trouble understanding when someone speaks. Why does this difference exist, and what can we do to better understand spoken English?
Yes, that's a very common problem, Diablo. Understanding written English is one thing, but understanding spoken English is another, sometimes much more difficult. And this difficulty is explained by several factors.
First, you need to know that spoken English is often very different from written English. In books or articles, sentences are complete, well-structured, and grammar is respected. But in everyday life, people speak quickly, use contractions, informal vocabulary, and sometimes even regional expressions.
For example, instead of saying, I do not know, we very often hear, I don't know. These forms aren't in textbooks, so the learner is surprised.
Secondly, speed plays an important role. English speakers talk quickly, especially with each other. This doesn't leave time to mentally translate what they hear. The ear isn't yet used to identifying the sounds, and this creates confusion. The words seem to blend into each other. For example, in a phrase like, "What are you going to do?" the words link, and it becomes almost, "What are you going to do?" For someone whose ear isn't trained, it can sound like one word.
Thirdly, there's the problem of passive vocabulary. A learner might recognize a word in writing, but not recognize it when spoken because they've never heard it pronounced. This is a very common phenomenon. For example, a student knows the word thorough, but doesn't know it's pronounced thur-uh. So when they hear it, they think it's another word.
So we must associate words with their sound, not just their written form. So what can we do to improve? There are several effective strategies. The first is regular listening. You need to listen to English every day, even if you don't understand everything. It could be podcasts, movies, YouTube videos, or even songs. The important thing is to get your ear accustomed.
Next, I highly recommend repeated listening. Take a short 1-minute excerpt, listen to it several times, then try to repeat what you hear. Then look at the transcription if it exists. This will help you make the link between the sounds and the words. It's a very powerful exercise.
It's also useful to practice active listening. This means you're not just listening in the background. You really concentrate on what is being said. You try to identify words, spot grammatical structures. This is a different practice from passive listening, which is also necessary but yields fewer short-term results.
Finally, I advise learning common liaisons and contractions. In English, linking between words is frequent. For example, going to becomes gonna, want to becomes wanna. If you don't know these phenomena, it complicates comprehension.
To conclude, understanding spoken English requires patience, regularity, and adapted methods. But the good news is that it's entirely possible and even very motivating because the more you understand, the more you want to listen. It's a virtuous circle.
Rita, many students tell us they lack the vocabulary to express themselves clearly. They understand the ideas, but don't have the words to formulate them. How can we enrich our vocabulary in English without it being too heavy or boring?
Yes, Diablo, that's another major difficulty many learners face. They have ideas in their head, but can't find the right words to express them. This can be frustrating, but there are simple, effective, and even enjoyable solutions to enrich your vocabulary without getting bored. First of all, you need to understand that vocabulary isn't learned all at once. It's not like a list you memorize overnight. You need to encounter words multiple times in different contexts to really retain them. This is called repeated exposure.
One of the most natural methods is to read regularly. And here, I'm not just talking about novels. It could be articles, dialogues, comics, blogs, or even recipes in English. The idea is to read things that interest you. When you like what you read, you're more motivated and therefore more receptive to vocabulary.
Next, I advise keeping a small vocabulary notebook or an app on your phone. Every time you see a new word, write it down, but not alone. Write it down with an example sentence. For example, instead of just writing, however, write, "It's cold, however, he's going out without a coat." This will help you understand the word's meaning in a real context.
It's also very useful to group words by theme. For example, words to describe a person, verbs to express feelings, vocabulary for the house, etc. This allows you to better organize your knowledge and find it more easily when you need it.
Another very effective method is to use new words as quickly as possible. If you learn the word disappointed, try to use it the same day. I was disappointed by the movie. By creating personal sentences, you give meaning to the word and memorize it better.
Games can also be an excellent tool. There are many applications like Quizlet or Anki that allow you to review vocabulary in a fun way. And even board games or role-playing games in English can be very useful.
Finally, interaction remains the best method. When you speak with native speakers or other learners, you are forced to use the words you know. This pushes you to make an effort, to look for synonyms, to rephrase, and above all, it makes learning lively.
So to summarize, vocabulary is learned little by little in an active and varied way. You need to read, listen, write, speak, play. In short, live the language. And above all, you shouldn't be afraid of not knowing everything. Even with limited vocabulary, you can say a lot of things. The important thing is to be clear, not perfect. Thank you so much, Rita, for these precise and motivating answers. It was fascinating.
See you very soon for a new episode of Learn English Faster. Keep learning with pleasure.
See you soon.